Single dad CEO mistakenly sends his daughter to the wrong school, only to meet a young teacher who will change their lives. Before we continue, please remember to like, share and subscribe. Grant Lawson sat at his sleek glass desk, the hum of city life muffled behind the floor-to-ceiling windows of his high-rise office. His phone buzzed relentlessly, and emails flooded his inbox. Between negotiating deals and managing crises, his mind was elsewhere, on his daughter Sophie. Today was the day he had to finalize her school enrollment, ensuring she attended the prestigious private academy he'd carefully researched. With barely a pause, Grant skimmed through the enrollment forms, signing papers and ticking boxes as calls pulled his attention every few minutes. The pressure of his CEO duties weighed heavily, yet he hurried, desperate to check this off his endless to-do list. Confident the paperwork was done, he sent it off without a second glance. The following morning dawned bright and clear. Sophie, her small backpack snug on her shoulders, bounced eagerly down the stairs. Her wide eyes sparkled with the thrill of starting school, a world full of new friends and adventures awaited. She was oblivious to the storm brewing in her father's mind. Grant was stunned when the school called to confirm her enrollment, but it wasn't the elite academy he had planned for. Instead, Sophie was registered at a humble neighborhood school. One far removed from the polished halls and tailored uniforms he envisioned. His heart tightened with worry. How would this affect her future? Would she be accepted? Was this mistake something he could fix quickly? That morning, Sophie stepped through the doors of the modest school, greeted by teachers and children whose lives were worlds apart from the ones Grant was used to. The bright smiles and laughter echoed in the hallways, contrasting with Grant's growing unease. As he paced his office, torn between frustration and helplessness, Grant realized this wasn't just a clerical error. It was the beginning of a journey neither he nor Sophie expected. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: life was about to change for both of them in ways he hadn't imagined. Sophie clutched her small backpack tightly as she stepped onto the cracked pavement of the neighborhood school. The building looked nothing like the sleek, polished academy her father had planned for her. The faded brick walls and worn playground equipment told stories of many years, of children who came from lives far different from her own. Despite her nervousness, Sophie's eyes were wide with curiosity. Inside, the hum of voices and laughter filled the air. Children from all walks of life moved between classrooms, their faces reflecting a mix of excitement and shyness. Sophie found herself surrounded by kids who wore clothes that were well-loved, who spoke in accents and tones unfamiliar to her. She felt out of place, but the warmth of a gentle smile from a girl sitting nearby offered a small comfort. Meanwhile, across town, Grant Lawson sat in his car, the city buzzing around him as he rehearsed the words he would say to the school's principal. His frustration was palpable. How had this mistake happened? He had planned every detail of Sophie's education, and now she was here, at a school that didn't fit his vision. He was determined to fix it. Inside the school, Grant's path crossed with Riley Hart, a young teacher with eyes full of kindness and conviction. Riley greeted Grant with calm confidence, her passion for teaching shining through every word. When Grant demanded an immediate transfer for Sophie, Riley didn't respond with anger or defensiveness. Instead, she spoke softly about the school's community, its challenges, and the ways it nurtured each child's potential beyond grades and prestige. Their conversation was charged with tension. Grant's protective instincts clashed with Riley's steadfast belief in the power of connection and understanding. Yet beneath the sharp edges of disagreement, there was an unspoken respect. Riley's dedication to her students, especially Sophie, was clear, and Grant found himself reconsidering his assumptions. As Sophie navigated her first day, discovering friendships and small joys, Grant left the school with a mind full of questions. The neat plans he'd made were suddenly blurred by a reality more complex than he'd anticipated. And though neither of them realized it yet, this unexpected meeting was the first step in a journey that would change their lives forever. Grant Lawson never thought he'd find himself walking school hallways again, especially not in a public elementary school filled with chipped paint, noisy chatter, and the scent of dry erase markers. But there he was, nearly every afternoon now, stepping out of boardrooms and into a world that made little sense to him. He told himself he was just checking on Sophie. After all, it was only a matter of time before he pulled her out and enrolled her in the elite academy she was meant to attend. But every visit, every glimpse through the classroom window, chipped away at that certainty. Sophie was changing. The little girl who used to keep her eyes on the floor now raised her hand with confidence. She laughed more freely, her steps lighter as she skipped out of school to greet him. At home, she talked nonstop about her day, about group reading under the window light, making dioramas with shoeboxes and glitter, and learning how to plant seeds in styrofoam cups. Her joy was not rehearsed or forced. It was honest. It was hers. Inside the classroom, Grant often stood quietly near the door, unnoticed but watchful. Riley Hart moved like a conductor among her students, gentle yet firm, calm but energetic. She didn't teach from a rigid plan. Instead, she followed curiosity like a thread, weaving math into stories, science into hands-on projects, and kindness into everything. She sat beside students on the carpet, let them read aloud even when they stumbled, and praised effort over perfection. Sophie's eyes always found Riley's. There was trust there, a connection Grant hadn't seen before. One afternoon, he arrived early and saw Sophie reading aloud to the class with a crown of paper flowers on her head. Riley was beside her, nodding with pride as the other students clapped. Grant felt a tightness in his chest, not of concern, but of something more unfamiliar. Gratitude, maybe. Or guilt. He remembered the nights Sophie had come home from her previous daycare withdrawn and tired. He used to chalk it up to her missing her mother. Now he wondered if she had simply never felt seen. Riley had changed that, and she had done it without reward or recognition. Just patience. Just heart. Grant stayed longer than he meant to that day. After class, Riley approached him, a light smile tugging at her lips. "She's got a spark," she said softly, glancing toward Sophie as she helped a classmate clean up glitter from the floor. She just needed a little room to let it shine. Grant didn't know what to say. He nodded, quietly absorbing the truth he'd been resisting for weeks. Sophie didn't need prestige. She didn't need a perfectly curated institution. She needed this. A place where she could be herself. A teacher who saw her as more than a name on a list. He walked out of the school with a quiet awe that afternoon. For the first time in a long while, Grant felt like he might be the one learning something. It started with brief, polite exchanges in the hallway, short conversations that barely scratched the surface. Grant Lawson would arrive in his tailored suit, nod to Riley Hart, and ask about Sophie's progress with the formality of a man used to getting summaries and spreadsheets, not stories. But Riley wasn't one to deliver facts without context. Slowly, she began offering glimpses into her classroom that revealed more than grades. She helped one of the boys with his reading today, Riley said one afternoon, smiling softly as they stood outside under the shade of an old oak tree. He struggles a lot. But Sophie didn't rush him. She waited, encouraged him. That kind of kindness? You can't teach that from a book. Grant had nodded, unsure what to say. He wasn't used to people speaking so earnestly. Still, he found himself lingering a little longer than usual. In the weeks that followed, their conversations stretched beyond Sophie. Riley shared anecdotes about her students, how one boy had memorized facts about planets to distract himself from his parents' divorce, how a girl painted rainbows every day because they reminded her of her grandmother. She talked about the tiny victories, the tears behind classroom doors, and the dreams that somehow survived hardship. Her stories were filled with compassion and humor, and slowly, they chipped away at the polished armor Grant wore so well. One late afternoon, while waiting for Sophie to finish a group project, Grant found himself sitting across from Riley in the empty classroom. The desks were pushed aside, the room glowing with the warm light of a setting sun. The silence was gentle, unforced. "She's different here," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "I used to think I had to give her the best of everything. The finest school, the best tutors. But now, I see her laugh more. I see her light up when she talks about your class. And I wonder if I ever really knew what she needed." Riley didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked at him, not as a CEO or a parent, but as someone carrying weight he rarely showed. "It's hard, isn't it?" she finally said. "Trying to be everything for someone. I see it in a lot of parents. You're not alone in that." Grant hesitated, then sighed. "I've been raising her alone since she was 2. Her mother, she passed suddenly. I threw myself into work, thinking if I built enough wealth, structure, a future, I could protect her. But I think maybe I just built walls instead." Riley nodded, her expression full of empathy. "It's okay to build walls," she said softly. "Sometimes we need them. But eventually, we need doors too." They sat in silence for a moment longer, a rare and comforting stillness between two people who had lived very different lives. Something unspoken passed between them, mutual respect, understanding, and the quiet beginnings of trust. From that day on, their conversations weren't just about school. They spoke about childhoods, the dreams they lost and found again, the fears that came with loving someone so deeply it hurt. Grant found himself drawn not only to Riley's insight, but to her presence, the way she listened, the way she didn't try to fix him but simply saw him. Walls, once firmly in place, began to crumble. And in their place, something tender and unexpected started to grow. The tension began on a gray Tuesday morning, just as the seasons were shifting. What started as a simple conversation in the principal's office spiraled into something heavier. Grant had offered to fund a technology upgrade for the school, a generous donation meant to equip every classroom with smartboards, tablets, and a new digital curriculum. The board had approved it instantly. But Riley wasn't as quick to celebrate. She voiced her concerns carefully but firmly. "Technology is helpful, but not if it replaces the things that matter. These kids need connection more than screens. They need hands-on learning, books they can hold, and space to imagine. Not constant digital noise." Grant didn't understand at first. He saw only the gift he was offering and the resistance in her eyes. His tone sharpened. "I'm trying to help this school move forward, Riley. You should be thanking me." The words hung in the air like ice. Riley's face fell, not in anger but in disappointment. "You think I don't appreciate support?" "I do. But you're trying to fix something that isn't broken the way you think it is." Their conversation ended in silence, the kind that stretches on too long and leaves an ache behind. Grant left the school early that day, jaw tight, heart heavier than he expected. He didn't like being questioned, especially by someone who had become so important to him without him realizing it. Meanwhile, Sophie sensed something had shifted. Her dad was distant. Riley was quieter. She tried to bridge the gap with her usual sunshine, drawing pictures, making jokes. But the warmth she was used to had dimmed. One night, Sophie sat on the stairs, listening to her father pace in his study. She clutched a crayon drawing in her lap, a picture of her, her dad, and Riley standing beneath a tree. She had drawn it for Riley's bulletin board. But now, she wasn't sure if it still belonged there. The next morning, Sophie was quieter at school. She hesitated before hugging Riley, unsure. Riley noticed, her heart twisting with worry. Conflict between adults always fell hardest on the children in the middle. Later that day, Grant sat alone in his office, staring out the window with the city lights reflecting off the glass. He thought about his daughter, how she had flourished in that little classroom, how her joy had become brighter since meeting Riley. And he thought about Riley herself. Her conviction. Her kindness. Her willingness to challenge him not out of pride, but out of care. He realized he hadn't really been listening. He had been trying to control, to shape the world into something efficient and tidy, just like he did in business. But life, real life, was messy. And the people who mattered most didn't need perfect solutions. They needed presence. They needed him to show up, not as a CEO, but as a father. Maybe even as a man capable of change. For the first time in a long while, Grant knew he had to make things right. Grant stood alone in the quiet of his high-rise office, the city skyline stretching out beyond the glass. His calendar blinked with back-to-back meetings, investment calls, and lunch with high-profile clients. It was a world he'd built with discipline and strategy. But none of it felt right anymore. Not since that conversation with Riley. Not since he saw the sadness in Sophie's eyes when she realized something was wrong between the two people she looked up to most. He didn't sleep much that night. Instead, he stayed up with Sophie's drawings spread across his desk, crayon hearts, trees, and people with smiling stick faces. In the corner of one picture, she'd written in shaky handwriting, "My happy place." That happy place wasn't a private academy or a CEO's office. It was a classroom filled with mismatched chairs, storybooks, and a teacher who believed in magic over metrics. The next day, Grant made a decision, not in a boardroom, but from the heart. He returned to the school, not as a businessman offering upgrades, but as a father ready to support the people who had changed his daughter's life. He met with the school board again, this time proposing a revised donation plan, one that supported the teachers, funded new art supplies, reading corners, and community building programs. The tech upgrades would still happen, but only where they fit the learning, not where they replaced it. At a small school assembly weeks later, Grant stood at the podium, wearing jeans instead of his usual suit. Parents, staff, and students watched with curiosity as the once intimidating CEO spoke from a place none of them expected. "We often think success is about numbers, power, and control," he said. "But I've come to learn that real success looks like a child laughing during story time. It's a teacher who believes in their students more than they believe in themselves. It's choosing to show up for the people who matter." The applause was warm and surprised. Riley, standing near the back of the room, felt her eyes sting with emotion. She had seen this man at his most guarded, and now here he was, open, changed. From that day forward, Grant wasn't just Sophie's father in name, he was present. He attended her school play and cheered the loudest, even when she forgot a line. He helped her build a volcano for science class and ended up with glue in his hair. He walked her to school some mornings, coffee in one hand and her little hand in the other. At home, bedtime became sacred. No more late-night emails. No more missed dinners. He read to her each night, just like Riley had done in class, with silly voices and dramatic pauses. And in those quiet, everyday moments, something deeper took root, a bond, a rhythm, a life reshaped by love. Grant didn't just choose to support a school. He chose to show up fully. As a father, as a man, and maybe, just maybe, as someone capable of a new kind of happiness. The auditorium buzzed with energy. Parents shuffled into their seats, whispering excitedly, cameras ready. On the makeshift stage, paper trees and cardboard castles stood crooked but proud, crafted with little hands and big imaginations. In the second row, Grant sat with his hands clasped tightly, more nervous than he'd ever been in a boardroom. Beside him sat Riley, her smile calm and steady, her hand lightly brushing against his as a silent reassurance. Then the curtain opened. Sophie stood front and center in a homemade costume, half princess, half scientist, just as she had insisted during rehearsals. Her eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on her father and Riley. A grin spread across her face, confidence replacing nerves in an instant. She began her lines, clear and steady, voice filled with the kind of joy Grant hadn't heard in years. Her performance wasn't perfect, she missed a cue, her crown slipped, but she laughed, shrugged, and kept going. The audience laughed with her, not at her, and something about that moment felt magical. It wasn't just a school play. It was a new beginning. As the play ended and the audience erupted in applause, Grant's hands hurt from clapping. Riley turned to him, her eyes shining. "She did it," she whispered. "No," he replied softly, eyes still on his daughter. "You did. Both of you." After the show, Sophie ran into their arms, breathless and glowing. Grant scooped her up and twirled her around, laughing without restraint. Riley joined them, and for a moment, time paused. 3 hearts, once strangers, now beat in sync. The journey to this point had been anything but planned. A mistaken enrollment. A tense meeting. A child caught in between. And yet, it led to a transformation that none of them could have foreseen. Grant had shed the armor of a CEO to embrace the vulnerability of being a present father. Riley had opened her heart to someone she once dismissed as a stubborn outsider. And Sophie, she had grown into her own, supported by the unwavering love of both. In the weeks that followed, the rhythm of life felt different. Softer. Stronger. Grant began supporting other neighborhood schools, using his influence to uplift rather than control. Riley continued to teach, now with Grant often volunteering for reading sessions and school projects. They didn't need to label what was growing between them. It was enough to know it was real. The story closes with Sophie's laughter echoing down a hallway, Riley's hand slipping into Grant's as they follow behind. No grand speeches. No dramatic endings. Just a small family built from unexpected choices and quiet courage. Sometimes, the best things in life don't come from carefully laid plans. Sometimes, they arrive disguised as mistakes, and stay as miracles. If you enjoyed the story, please remember to like, share and subscribe. Thank you.